Spiritual Life Center, transforming lives as we love, serve, and remember who we are. One heart, one mind, one soul at a time.
Well, good evening. Welcome to another segment of WOW Unplugged. Celia Cir is here with me. Hi, Celia.
Hello.
It's good to get back with you again. You know, people keep saying that they find the chemistry between us so interesting, and I think it's that generational jump from like grandmother's age to, no, I'm not calling myself an old grandma. I'm just saying that, sometimes there's this generations that get together that are separated by one or two other generations.
Well, and I mean, I understand what you're saying. I ultimately don't feel that you are my friend that happens to be older than me. I don't feel that you have more experience than me, but the age thing doesn't come into play. I don't feel like I'm talking to an old person. So
well, thank you. So I don't feel like I'm talking to a young person either in terms of ew.
Yeah.
So you were asking me about other religions. What's up?
Yeah. So this conversation actually came about because, as you know, I am an entrepreneur. I have my own business. And one of the podcasts that I like to listen to is called the Mind Your Business podcast. And that is a podcast for mindset-centric entrepreneurs who may or may not believe in the law of attraction or woo-woo things. Woo-woo, that's another podcast I listen to, Being Boss. We call it woo-woo. And they actually had an episode where I was listening to it and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I know I want to talk to Deborah about this because it keeps popping up in one way, shape, or form, which is the similarities between religion as we know it, structured religion, and actually the new thought kind of process and mindfulness that you and I know more accurately. In this particular podcast episode, the narrator was talking to a woman by the name of Kim McCarter, and she is a very Christian woman who had a very hard time wrapping her brain around mindset, that mindset principle. And she mentioned in the podcast that she talked to her pastor saying this, I just can't get around it. Like, I just don't understand it because it sounds totally counterintuitive to what I know. And he was like, well, you know that it's all just the same, right? That meditation is a form of prayer and like all of this stuff, right? And so it opened up her mind, and actually, ironically, now she focuses on consulting with people on mindset who are Christian faith, which is funny. So for me, I was like, it's all the freaking same, right? Like, and that's just kind of where I came from. So I wanted to ask you some questions and really dive into this because it's, I believe, maybe I shouldn't speak for you, but, one God, many paths, that's the name of this particular Unplugged. And I really feel like this is a really good example of that because one God, many paths can be all religions have their own sense of truth and they all lead to God. But I'm actually talking about how I'm just going to go ahead and start with my first bullet point, which isn't spending time in gratitude just a form of prayer?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you just stop, which you have to do to get into gratitude, right? Because if you are spending a day dealing with all kinds of stuff, like having to buy a new refrigerator or buy a new house or, move twice in 2 months, not that I know anybody who's doing that, but you have to slow down. You have to stop and you have to think, oh, there's something to be grateful for here. Because if you're in the middle of one of those twirls or swirls or whatever we call them, spinning like crazy, it's really hard to find something in all of that to be grateful for. And so just the stopping is a form of meditation. And then you can say, okay, so this happened, and this happened, and this is good. This part is good. There's this thing that's right in here that's good, and I can be grateful for that. And then that gives you hope, and it gives you something to work from. So that, and then and it can take 15, 20 minutes to find that gratitude, or sometimes it's like, oh yeah, and it's just right there. So it doesn't always take the going and sitting down and meditating for 30 minutes, every single day at the same time to find that. It's the stopping.
Right.
And the being the mindful about that. I don't want to feel like this. I want to feel better. Oh, I'll find something to be grateful for.
Yeah. See, and that was the other thing, was that right around the same time I heard this podcast, I actually was gifted a book. It's something about the daily office. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the daily office is that principle of like 2 minutes of stillness, and then prayer, and then scripture and discernment, and then back into stillness. And I'm just like, this is just mindful meditation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we in New Thought, we actually are blessed with a conglomeration of teachings. I mean, Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was essentially the teacher of almost every single person who started a New Thought church, the Fillmores, Ernest Holmes, I mean, the list goes on. She taught many, many people. She studied all of the Eastern religions. And then Ernest Holmes, I believe, did too, but so did Charles Fillmore. And so they were able to bring in these other methodologies into our teaching. One of the things I like most about Ernest Holmes is that he called this a spiritual system. He didn't call it religion. He called it a spiritual system. And one of the things that we get very confused about is that the Eastern religion or teachings about meditation are clear your mind, make your mind blank. Well, we all know that's impossible. You can't not have thoughts, but it's the learning to either manage those thoughts or allow those thoughts to just have their own way for a while, and then let them go on down the stream. So we're in our teaching, we are very much a conglomerate of different types of thinking that have come down through the ages.
It's actually interesting you mentioned that, because just this morning I was reading an article about Thomas Edison and some of his things that he did. And, one of them was that he would always go to bed with an intention, that there was always a question, because he felt that our subconscious mind would work on that while we were sleeping. And so when you think about that practice of sitting down actually to pray before bed, you're actually clearly setting an intention before you go to bed in prayer. To me, it was like, this is all like, when I started realizing all of these things, that they were all connected, it was like a huge, like Oprah aha moment for me. I was like, it's all the same, So,
yeah, I mean, one of my main things is like, if I'm working on a meditation or if I'm working on something, I do it in the morning, and I'm not exactly a morning person, but I'll write to a certain point and I get stuck, and so then I go take a shower. And it's my relationship with water probably, but in the shower it's like, oh, bing, 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 and there it is. And then I avoid writing for 4 hours, and then I come back and do it. But like any good writer will do. But I think it's about giving yourself space, to allow the energies to work with you.
Yeah, no, totally. Actually, that was another thing I read. Elon Musk's like one thing for success is taking a shower every day, because that's when he feels the most clear. So, that's the thing. It's getting that quietness. We cannot all run at 110%. We need to allow ourselves that buffer of time to relax and like rejuvenate and really become center with the universe. So that actually brings me to my next question is, can you necessarily say, faith in God is universal intelligence / that mindset? Like it seems like it's kind of transferable. So I'm sure somebody would tell me, no, faith in God is one thing and universal intelligence is another thing. But I'm actually kind of seeing it as they're the same, because if you put your faith in God and you believe in universal intelligence, it wouldn't technically that be the same thing. If I put out there something, universal intelligence spits out, the same thing to me. Well, I'm praying to God, he spits that out to me. Am I making any sense? Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So think about the fact that we live in a material world, in material bodies, but we are souls with bodies. We're not bodies with souls, first of all. And there is an idea that comes, and then the idea comes down and it's unnamed. The Tao Te Ching talks about this, and then it becomes a thought, and then when it becomes a thought, we start naming it. And so we have to name everything, because we have to make everything make sense to us, or we couldn't function in this world, right? This thing that's sitting in front of me over here is a chair. And if I have to name it a chair, so I know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. I know how to function. But all of the thoughts, all of the energy that is coming into us is coming. There's one power, one presence in the universe. There's only one power and one presence, and it's what we decide to do with it here. And it goes from the people and cultures who need and want a lot of structure and need to be and feel like they need to be told what to do, so they go into these very structured religions. And then as people grow in different ways, and I'm not going to say one's better than the other, because everybody's exactly where they need to be at the time. Mm-hmm. But then as person grows, perhaps in more self-confidence, whatever, they don't need someone to tell them what to do. They don't need someone to tell them how to think. They don't need that feeling that they're lost and they need to be saved. Mm. But if you think about, and this is going off on something, but if you think about the fact that we are souls that come into bodies, and we start to forget where we came from and who we are. And so on some level, I believe that we start to think that we did something wrong because we don't know who we are anymore. And maybe that's the germ of feeling like we need to be saved. Because, I'm stuck here. How do I get out of here? Mm-hmm. I mean, I like planet Earth. I'm having fun here. But some people aren't. And I've heard a lot of people say, I don't want to believe in reincarnation because I don't want to ever come back here again. I don't want to do this again. And it's like, well, you don't have to do the same thing every time, Yeah. But there's just one energy in the planet. And so whether you call it intelligence, you call it God, you call it Herman, you call it atoms. I think if you realize that every single atom surrounding you and part of you right now, they're all made out of exactly the same thing. There's not a what's that behind you, that little turquoise thing, that typewriter thingy? Yeah. Yeah, there's not typewriter thingy atoms and Celia atoms and leaf chair atoms. They're all just atoms, and they're all exactly the same. And it's how they arrange themselves, how we perceive them, and then how we name them. Mm-hmm. That make any sense?
Yeah. And, that's actually, getting deeper into all of this, I feel like the thought process of going to church and surrendering yourself to one thing or another is that it's also kind of giving you the ability to answer an unanswerable question of what happens after I pass. And so I have been examining kind of the different religions and how, what the afterlife. I've always had a major question about afterlife, mainly because, my dad passed when I was 19, story of my life. And so it begs the question, what happens after we die? And that is a very heavy question for a lot of people to deal with. And that idea that maybe something doesn't happen afterwards is something I think a lot of people have a really hard time chewing on too. So religion actually gives an answer to that. And once you are able to answer that question for yourself, you're able to then feel a sense of relief in your life. And I feel like that's actually where a lot of the comfort of standard religion comes from. So actually, I don't think we were going to go there, but let's go ahead and dive in.
This is why we call it Unplugged.
Yeah, right. You know, I don't think we've touched on it before in this sense. When it comes to the afterlife, for you, would you mind sharing what that means to you? What do you think the afterlife is, or have you decided that you're okay with not knowing?
Oh, I think I know, and of course that's a lot of arrogance, right? But because I've blessed with the ability or to be actually have contact with people who have passed, and I've had lots of dreams and lots of experiences with it. What I think that I'm probably sort of on the right track about is that we continue on, it's not oblivion, and that I also don't believe that there's this, you go out and you're like, okay, there's the door to hell over here and there's the door to heaven over here. I subscribe to the idea that we evaluate ourselves when we go. It's like, okay, how did I do this time? So, because I look at this as a school, as a place where we come to learn and to teach and to be involved, and so it's more about that. And there's a book called Journey of Souls by Michael. Of course, his last name is gone, but he actually he was doing past life regressions, and he had someone who somehow or another regressed to in between lives. And he spent the next, I don't know, 20 something, 30 years regressing people to in between lives, what was going on. And it's an interesting book. There was a lot of it that seemed very familiar to me. And there were a couple of places it's like, nah. So I didn't swallow it hook, line, and sinker, but there was something that resonated with me in terms of, we do continue on. And it's not this, I also don't believe in a male God that's up there with his little smiting sword going, wham, wham. I just, and life just feels to me so much like there is only one power and presence, and that if you can be in tune with it for even 5 minutes a day, life is so much better. And I also respect people who are in very structured religions, because that's what they need to feel safe here on the planet. That's what guides them through their day. You and I are both pretty freewheeling people, and it's like, just give me a hint and I'll figure it out myself.
Yeah.
But not everybody's like that. And we have a lot of people at SLC who have worked through those other things, and they are learning that, I get to make my own decisions. I have choices.
Well, okay, so that actually brings up a question for me in regards to sin. A lot of structured religion is based off of, maybe I shouldn't say a lot. I'm going to say I misspoke on that one, but some structured religion is based on this idea of, you are a sinful being and that you must be baptized in order to be washed of your sins. And then you have to continuously work on not being a sinful person, yada, yada, right? So actually, this might be a funny question, but maybe it's not. But is there any concept of sin in New Thought or what we're discussing today?
We define, in fact, Charles Fillmore and almost everybody, sin. In fact, the origin of the word sin means missing the mark. I believe it was an archery term. So it simply means missing the mark. It doesn't mean that you're evil, wicked, mean, and bad, and nasty. It just means that oops. You could say oops instead of sin. Oh, I'm an oopser. Sorry.
Isn't that a mistake? I'm like, so are you just saying that, there's a whole flock of people who just feel like they're mistakers?
Yeah. and I mean, you had a church, the Church of Rome, and I'm talking about the Church of Rome. I mean, what better way to get control of the people, and what better way to get, excuse me, but butts in the seats? You've got a bunch of illiterate people who are terrified that they're going to go to hell. So there's a lot of political, cultural stuff that goes along with all of these different religions. There's religions that don't believe in educating people. There's religions that believe that people should be educated to the highest level possible. There's religions that teach that we're horrible, awful sinners. There's us who say we are, divine beings in a body. We've come here for a purpose. And so it's, it's like every level of human, or every aspect of human consciousness, I believe, is encompassed in all the different religions.
Mm-hmm.
But it all comes back to one energy, and it's so fascinating to me. I've been fascinated by religions my whole life. And just to be clear, I am not an interfaith minister. I am a New Thought minister. So I haven't studied the different religions like our other ministers have. But I've always been fascinated by religions and how people do things and how we do things in similar ways. And the Eucharist in the Roman Catholic and Episcopal churches actually has its roots in the Jewish religion,
Mm-hmm.
in Judaism. And so in some respects, if you really, really, really want to understand Christianity at its very deepest level, you need to understand Judaism first. We were just talking about how there's so many similar rituals and celebrations, and one of the celebrations that's worldwide is the celebration of the coming of the light in December, or that time of year. If you look at almost every single religion, and then you go back to the mythology, and it all comes back to the seasons. And so you have summer where everything is in full bloom, and then you have fall as we go back into the dark time, and then we come back through winter, which is dark, and then coming back into spring. And so many of these celebrations that have been incorporated into religions have their basis in a mythology that almost every single culture has had in one way or another. If you did research on the Great Flood, there's evidence of a flood in almost every culture as well.
Really? That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. So none of these things just like, it may have started in one part of the world. I'm not a scholar here, but yeah, everybody's, the people, you're watching the seasons, and you live in a little hut, and you don't, and you're at the mercy of nature, right? And as people grew and expanded and started building houses and to where we are now, we still can't control the weather, but there is still the seasons, watching the natural flow of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you really start paying attention to all of these different religions, there's something in them that has to do with the nature of the world.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even if we were to, take a step back into our history books, I think it was Roman or Greek culture that, a lot of their gods and goddesses were actually based off of astronomical, what was going on in the sky and what they were seeing. So yeah, a lot of this stuff, it has to do with, early on cultures kind of finding an answer for things that they did not understand.
And at the same time, they were more holistic than we are now. They saw the sky and the earth and all of the stuff in between and everything as part of one whole thing. And we have separated so much out. And that's one of the differences with the New Thought teaching, is that we are working towards understanding and embracing oneness again.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't live in a world where, we can go outside and sit in the yard, but we don't really live in a world where we are so in touch with nature and with how this whole system that we live in works.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be an eclipse. Well, we know that because we read it in the paper. We don't know that because we pay attention to the sky.
Right.
Yeah. And we run out with our funny little glasses for and watch the solar eclipse or whatever.
Right.
So we're not as in tune.
Right. Well, let me go ahead and ask you this. So kind of with what we've been talking about, do you think that maybe someone who's like me, who is really into the mindset and looking into universal intelligence. I mean, do you feel that there's any benefit to, you know, researching and kind of trying out the different religion traditions that kind of are similar to what we're talking about? Or because I initially go to leave all well enough alone, but I get so interested wanting to like learn about it, you know. Obviously I don't want to waste anybody's time, but like maybe I want to stop by and like check something out, you know. I don't know, what is your opinion on trying a little bit of everything?
You know, trying a little bit, going and seeing what other people are doing and seeing what other people teach and having that experience is really, really good, because then it gives you perspective. If you're only in one teaching your entire life, then you don't know. It's like someone living in a really small town and then getting in the car and driving to the big city and finding out that, oh my goodness, they've been wearing, ladies are wearing their skirts 5 inches shorter than I have for the last, 40 years. Or, it's a different perspective. And I believe that the only way that you can come to your own conclusions is by having enough experience and enough information. When I was very young, I was 24, 25, and I was in a Unity church. I discovered Unity when I was that age, and I was really furious, by the way, that nobody had told me about it before then. My entire life, 25 years, and no one told me about this stuff. And I went to the minister and I said, I want to be a Unity minister. And he said, okay. Now, I didn't have a degree. It was ridiculous, but he said, okay. And then ultimately, he said his mother had a seminary for religious science. She had actually moved from Unity to religious science so that she could train people in the field, because she didn't think that you should have to give up 3 years of your life to go get trained. So I went and met with her, and she agreed to take me. And I spent 3 days crying because I wasn't leaving Unity. And I knew it was ridiculous, but I did. And then I went to, and I told my mentor, and I just told him that. And he said, Deborah, it's all the same thing. It's all the same teaching. And it was the very best thing that he could have done, was to shove me out of the little Unity cocoon, not because there's anything wrong with Unity, but I trained with them for 3 years. I'd never finished the program. And then I went off and lived my life. And it was 34 years later before I did something else and became an ordained New Thought minister. Mm-hmm. But the reason people think that I know so much, which I really don't think I do, but the fact that I talk from all these different angles is because I've spent over 40 years looking at everything.
Right.
I've lived deeply among the Mormons. I've had a lot of really good Roman Catholic friends. I was an Episcopalian for years. I have friends who are Jehovah's Witnesses, and I look into into all of the Eastern religions, and I just, it's one thing to be dabbling in them, and it's another one to just find out what they're doing. And one of the things that I just need to clear this up, because it's my own little tweaky thing, is that a lot of people say that what we do is new age. Mm. We are not new age. We are older than dirt. Honestly, this teaching has been around since the beginning. And to me, the difference between what we teach and new agey stuff is that in new agey stuff, you take a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit here, and you put it together, but there's never really a good foundation. Mm. There's not, so it's like at some point you come back to, this is my belief system. This is the foundation from which I spring. Mm-hmm. But until you have more information.
Yeah, a lot of what I base my information off of is my history, which is mainly Christian. I have understanding of Hinduism and Buddhism from way early, like in middle school. I was able to take some classes on that. And I have my experience with the Mormons, being a 15-and-a-half-year-old who moved to the Mecca of Mormonville, if you will. But, so I have a lot of learning, a lot of exploring to do. And you're absolutely right. Everyone kind of takes from it what their experience is. So that actually reminds me of one question I wanted to ask, which is, how there are multiple symbols within each religion that seem to be somewhat transferable. And what I mean is, for example, Mother Mary. Mother Mary is almost, to me, a unified female figure that has taken on many forms throughout history, if you will. The goddess, if you were someone who follows the goddess, Divine Mother, if you're a Miss of Avalon fan, they openly very much talk about how Mary was in a convent at the very end. They mentioned that, but Mary was actually the goddess that they worshipped, and so maybe that's a two-part question. Do you know more about Mary in the sense of like, has she popped up other places that are transferable? And then are there other figures, like I only know of one Jesus, and obviously we're not going to get into super interfaithy stuff, but is there a transferable character out there who also is Jesus? I'm just getting real,
okay,
right?
the Jesus question, that's almost an entire conversation by itself, because
Okay.
no, there is the myth of the dying and resurrecting God, and it is very, very old myth, and you'll find it in many religions. But let's go to Mary first. Now, you and I were talking before we started recording about, let's go back to the Church of Rome. I'm not talking about the Roman Catholic Church of today. I'm talking about the Church of Rome back when Christianity was starting, and it was very, very much male dominated, and it was very much Jesus dominated. And then as Roman culture spread and the church spread with it, as they went, they would go into different areas as the Romans were conquering them. The people with the church were very smart. They didn't just come in and demand that they, take on everything that they were being taught. They incorporated the local cultures, and so many places worship the goddess, or goddess theology was part of their culture. And so what better way to incorporate the goddess into the Mother Mary?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at all the religions, there is almost all of them have the divine feminine as well as the divine masculine. We happen to come from a culture and the Christianity that has focused so much more on the masculine. But that was the way that you incorporate the goddess. And so, well, we can't get rid of the goddess. They're going to really not like that. Oh, but see, here's Mary, and the virgin birth is part of the myth of the dying, the whole story of the dying God as well. And like I said, I think that would be another conversation. But it's really all about incorporating what people have already had in their cultures, all these and their local religions. Anybody really, I mean, the divine feminine, I mean, it's the feminine that brings babies into the world. They're that whole divinity and the respect for that, which is, it goes in waves throughout this world. There have been times when many cultures were female dominated. We haven't, in our lifetime, haven't really seen a lot of that. But so it's all there, and it's all been incorporated in. So you're going to find the divine mother, the goddess. Again, it's like what you name this thing that some people call God, or the Holy Spirit, or the divine energy, or so the Holy Mother. And think about how many different versions of the Virgin Mary there are. There's the Virgin of Guadalupe. There's the Mary not Mary Magdalene, but there are, you think about it, that Mary herself shows up in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different, even within the Roman Catholic Church, depending on which country you're in, is which form of Mary you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we're filtering it through our consciousness. And I know people who relate to the Virgin of Guadalupe, but Mother Mary, not so much. And it's like, okay, it's words. And of course, that's what we talk about so much in New Thought, is the words that we say, what we call things. We call them good or bad, or Emma Curtis Hopkins had this thing where there was the material, I think she called it the physical, the material, and the mystical. And I don't have those first two right, but the first one is you named things good and bad. The second one, you grow into naming things good. And the third one, the mystical, is where you don't name it at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the evolution of our consciousness.
Hmm.
When you go into meditation is when you have those moments of where you stop naming things. You're not naming it good, you're not naming it bad, you're just there.
That's the thing, is that like I tried the daily office book that I got was like a 41-day journal or something like that. And it's supposed to be like, you start your day off with this and you end your day off with this. And, I remember growing up and at 5:30 in the morning, my grandparents waking up and them doing the scriptures and praying in the morning. And that idea of like 2 times a day, that's in transcendental meditation. They meditate 20 minutes, 2 times a day. But, I was sitting there and I remember trying to be like still and thinking to myself, like, am I supposed to be thinking about like Jesus in particular, or like, what? And then like, but I'm following this up with like a history lesson, because that's what I call the Bible. It's a history lesson. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's interesting, the idea of like what you just said, the idea of not naming anything or actually being able to just kind of be there. Like, it does take a while to get there. So actually, that reminds me of an earlier question I had, which was, so we talked about gratitude and how gratitude is actually a form of prayer. So in our new thought practice, asking for help is what I kind of remember what prayer was really supposed to be, was that not only was it a moment to thank God for the gifts that he has given us, but it could also be to ask for blessings for a particular person or for yourself, or help with a journey you're on. And so is there a transferable word that maybe I'm missing in New Thought for the asking for help part of prayer? Or is it just called prayer?
It's prayer. I mean, a very loose, casual definition would be that prayer is when you're talking to God and meditation is when you're listening to God.
Oh, I like that.
And of course, you can get way into that one, but for me, that is, I would, and a lot of people go into meditation through prayer, and they state their intention, and they state, that they'd like to see health in all of these people, and see whatever current situation is resolved in the highest and best way, and then go into meditation. For me, doing that way, it kind of gets the stuff out of my head. So I've said it all. Hey, God. I mean, because God, or the is, absolutely knows exactly what's going on and knows what's going on in our minds, but we have to say it so that we understand it and we can put it in the right place in the right perspective. Mm-hmm. And so we do that. One way to do that is prayer, and then if you can allow yourself to settle, then you can listen. So that's a really extremely oversimplified but very useful way to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because in meditation, even though you've got thoughts in your head, you're not supposed to be working.
Mm-hmm.
Working on prayer, and then and some people call it all the same thing. And again, it's our need to name things.
Yeah. I mean, even like as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, kind of along the lines of all the questions I was thinking of asking, like, it's that I keep coming back to you while you're trying to name it. And that's actually kind of the issue, is that like this person has a name for it, this person has a name for it, but it ultimately is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that we all have our own experience with each thing. It's like you and I are both having fun right now, but we're also having different experiences. We're doing almost exactly the same thing, but my experience is slightly different from yours. Mm-hmm. And whenever you say something, you say it to 6 people, 6 people hear the same words, but they hear something slightly different. And they might all come to a similar conclusion, but we all, because words are huge triggers for us, right? I mean, just an example is this whole thing about accepting things. And I've been teaching this for, I don't know how many years now. And the word accept still triggers me because for me, in my brain, accepting something means I've got to take it and keep it. Mm. If I acknowledge it, I go, okay, you're there, you're good, but I can move on from that. So it's not like I'm ignoring it. I'm going, I see you there. I understand you're there, and we're not doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So everybody has those words. I mean, there are people who, when you say Christian, they just completely freak out because of their negative experiences in Christian churches. But it's, because they're thinking about that. They're not thinking about perhaps what we teach, which is a different, it's a form of Christianity, a lot of what Unity teaches.
Right.
Christian based, but we're not thumping Bibles at people and yelling at them and telling them they're going to go to hell if they don't come to church. I remember when I was in my 20s in that church, and we were having trouble getting Sunday school teachers. And I asked my mentor, I said, why do we have so much trouble? He says, because we can't tell people they'll go to hell if they don't come teach Sunday school.
The surest way to get something done, you're going to go to hell.
yeah, okay, I'll be there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about perspective. It's all about trying to make a world that we understand. Mm-hmm. And I will just say, I don't know, we're probably getting close to being done, I think, but a lot of people are really struggling right now during this COVID-19 and all the other layers that have been put on that. And so much of this is because our routines have been completely disrupted. Mm-hmm. And all the things that have happened in my life, and a lot now, there's been assassinations. I've not lived through one where my actual daily routine was disrupted as deeply as this. Mm-hmm. And so it's very hard for people to be putting meaning right now because everything is disrupted and nothing makes sense. So if you take this back to our need as human beings for things to make sense and for us to be able to make sense out of them and put things together so that we can walk through our day, it's no wonder that people are really struggling. Mm-hmm. And I just want everybody to know we are not all in the same boat because we're all doing it differently, but we're all struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. I feel like we're going to see, there was already a shift going on. People were already becoming more interested in the woo-woo spirituality, if you will, not like the confines of a normal church. And now more than ever, people are really searching for answers. So I think it's phenomenal, but it really goes back to needing to put forth this message so people like us who are not aware of it can come find it and really reap the benefits.
Yeah.
So I know we have to wrap up, but I've got a question for you that I'm sure you are going to table for next time. And this is totally off the cuff, but I think it's going to make people laugh. Did you believe that Adam and Eve walked with dinosaurs?
No. There were people and dinosaurs were not here at the same time. The cartoons have it wrong.
Oh, boy, oh boy.
No, they didn't ride a dinosaur. They didn't walk with one. They didn't have a pet little dino running around. There were no people and dinosaurs here at the same time.
No, so they didn't casually, accidentally omit dinosaurs from the Bible?
No, they did not.
Okay.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff intentionally omitted from the Bible, but dinosaurs were not part of that. Unless you're talking about really, really old people who are hanging around that you didn't know
about. No, but they wouldn't be around with Adam and Eve either because they were just here on the planet by themselves with the one-handed God, right?
With the one-handed God, which is a long story, people, and
go back and watch Deborah's last Sunday service.
So thank you, Celia, so much for being with me tonight. And we're going to do some more of these.
Yeah.
And we're going to find some other people to talk to as well. And who knows what you'll be seeing in the coming weeks. And so we really appreciate your supporting SLC. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you next time. May the joys of the world be with you.
Spiritual Life Center, transforming lives as we love, serve, and remember who we are. One heart,